And can you elaborate on why Willa has two hearts?
The hybridization that occurred in certain genetic lineages led to a more efficient system of storing oxygen in the body for the purpose of accessing higher frequency domains and information. The oxygenation of the body is of paramount importance in speeding up the vibrational resonance of the physical form and having the idea of not exactly two hearts, but more chambers in the heart than you have that makes it function as if it's doubled, allows for a more efficient distribution of oxygen throughout the system, and also a greater amount of oxygen throughout the system that then increases the probability of raising the frequency to the exact pitch required for easier connection to higher frequency realms of consciousness and other dimensions of experience.
So just like when Darryl does deep breathing in order to make the connection with you, the idea is that she has a much higher level of oxygen in her system than we do?
Yes, and this is also why we have mentioned from time to time that there is more oxygen on our planet in the atmosphere. Not a lot, but enough that it allows for the stabilization of that frequency to be common.
Okay. Is there a way that you can support elementals in this time of planetary transition, since they seem to have an important role in keeping the Earth in balance?
Well, in a sense, the idea of taking on the role from your side of keeping the Earth in balance and doing the things that will help stabilize the environment in positive ways, increasing the idea of the natural world and making those connections from your side will be something that will also allow them more opportunity to do so from their side. So the whole idea of making the connection with them and taking actions in your reality that are more representative of enhancing the environment, stabilizing the environment in a more natural way, is what you can do from your side while they do what they do from their side. It's not entirely up to them. This has to be a relationship. It has to be, in a sense, a 50-50 proposition.
It just occurred to me that the connection that elementals experience with Earth and nature is a profoundly deep love affair, in a sense.
Yes.
And that the more that you love Earth and you love all the elements of Earth, the more you are putting yourself in a state that's similar to what an elemental might experience.
Exactly. And therefore, like we have said with regard to extraterrestrial contact, you have to meet them halfway. You have to bring your vibrational frequency at least much closer to the level that they operate on in order for you to perceive them and in order for you to interact with them in the ways that will allow for the acceleration of the balance of the natural world of Earth.
Now, one person had an experience where they were with a grove of trees and suddenly shifted to a parallel reality where they realized that the forest is inhabited with tree people. In other words, the people of the forest are the trees, and that they are a community that has very strong bonds, and they're also very welcoming of the human consciousness.
That's why we say that the trees are, in a sense, the ambassadors between humans and the natural world, because they're connected to the idea of physical humans, they're connected to the idea of the elementals, and in a sense they act as the go-between. So they're always welcoming you into their reality to act as, well, for lack of a better term, brokers between the two different civilizations of human and elemental. That's the common bond. That's the common frequency. That's the common interface, are the trees.
So they experience each other as individual consciousnesses
And collective, both.
and a collective at the same time. And they have young people and old people, and it's just it's a community of being.
It is. But again, when you say young people and old people, we understand what you mean in terms of time and the growth of trees.
Yeah.
But don't assign a human perspective to that, because they don't see it exactly in that way. Remember that they can perceive things in parallel realities in multiple dimensions a little bit differently than you can. And the idea of young and old has a particular perspective to them, but it's not exactly the human perspective.
And yet you need the older trees in a forest in order to share their energy with the younger trees.
Yes, yes. But again, all we're simply saying is the terminology that you're using, the definitions that you're using, have a particular human bent to them that is not experienced exactly in the same way by the tree consciousness.
And one last thing about trees, that they seem to have a very generous spirit in general.
Yes.
And their genetics are actually more complex than ours.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
So they are actually highly evolved beings in many respects.
Yes. In fact, the very idea that they are apparently to you immobile requires the extra genetics and the extra abilities, because they can't move away from things like humans can. Therefore, they have to have more adaptability to a variety of situations, hence a more complex genetic structure.
And they communicate with each other chemically, so they let each other know that there's danger or all kinds of communication.
Yes.
That happens.
Yes, yes.
So it's very sophisticated, and yet it's hidden to human consciousness unless you shift your vibration to be able to perceive what is actually happening.
Yes, but it's not hidden on purpose. It is simply the idea of the limitations that human consciousness has placed on itself, because long ago, when humans were much more connected in their understanding of their expression of nature, it wasn't hidden at all. It was understood very clearly.
So that would be Native Americans, Lemurians, those beings were much more
early Atlanteans, yes. And not leaving out the idea of people in other parts of your planet, because many of them also had a more natural way of relating to nature.
Yes, I think almost every continent had its share of shamanic beings that were connecting with nature.
Yes, yes, yes. And it was much more common in those societies to understand those things as natural.
Now, one person has a boa constrictor, and he wants to know how to communicate with that being, and if it's possible to create a relationship and an emotional connection between a reptilian being, and I'm talking about actual reptile, and human.
Well, of course it is. So again, many of the things we've already said will apply as well. The idea of the deep emotional bond, the idea of using imagery instead of words. The reptile will also assist you in understanding exactly how to frame those images, how to frame those emotions in its context, in its quote-unquote language.
So you're basically saying, be the snake, and then you will know how to talk to the snake.
In essence, yes, and the snake will help you if it really senses a deep willingness and a deep bond in your consciousness that wishes to do so. So again, this is why it's so important to have that deep, loving, vibrational, harmonic bond, because then the being will sense that you really desire a connection and will help you with that connection by sending the imagery and the feelings as well that will help you understand how to focus in on its particular way of creating a communication.
Okay, I think that's helpful. Let's see. I'm going to switch over to a question having to do with the precursors.
Yes.
And we wanted to give you an opportunity to clarify the idea of whether precursors were actually born here on the planet or whether they are actually
Yes.
extraterrestrial.
We understand that there may have been a slip in translation when we first talked about that concept. And this is why we have recently begun to talk about people born on the planet who have similar hybridized genetics to precursors as being preparers rather than calling themselves precursors. Precursor, by definition, is something that comes before something else. And therefore, since you're already on the planet, you can't be precursors because you're not coming to the planet, you're on the planet. But you can be preparers. And the preparers can exhibit some of the same vibrational frequencies as the precursors. But precursors are born off the planet. They are hybrids from off the planet, are not born on Earth. Who is born on Earth are preparers. We apologize for any confusion in translation.
Did you say your ship is called Nexus? Someone...
No, it's not called Nexus, but the idea is that it can use nexus points in order for its ability to shift location to location. In a sense, any ship that uses that technology can be called a Nexus-style ship.
And was the USFO that crashed at Roswell just as alive as that?
No. Different kind of technology altogether, a little bit more akin to your understanding of technology.
Do stories and fictional universes actually exist in their own right? And we are sort of seeing them and tapping into their energy when we read something or think about them?
They can. Now, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily all experienced in the same kind of physical way that you experience your reality, but that doesn't mean that they're any less real. So when we say that they're all real in one way, shape, or form, you have to understand that that may include a multitude of dimensions, including the spirit realm. So they're not necessarily physical in the way that you know it, but they are real. You are tapping into a real reality on some level of consciousness. Now, again, some of them may be absolutely the way you imagine them, and some of them may be a little bit different. But somewhere along the line, all the attributes are real, whether they all belong in one reality or several.
Okay. One individual, when they were a child, they dreamed that they basically visited inner Earth. And they felt that they were being teased by adults about this idea.
Yes.
Is there an actual inner Earth culture or an inner Earth reality?
Yes, but it's not actually physically in your Earth. It's in another dimension. Many people may mistake the idea that it's inside your Earth physically because of how they may arrive there by going through different portals that sometimes can be underground or in caves or what have you. But without knowing it, they may have actually literally shifted into a different dimensional reality and still assume that they're on the Earth or in the Earth that they were originally on, which they're not until they go back through the portal and come back out onto their original reality, so to speak. But the idea is that there are other dimensions that are perceived as being inside physical objects, such as a planet, but they're not literally there necessarily. They can be, but they're not literally there in your case. So people that find themselves in what they perceive to be inner Earth are actually in another dimension that they've shifted to without necessarily knowing it.
And can you tell us anything about what it's like there?
Well, there are many different kinds of places there. There isn't just one place that people go to. There are shells within shells within shells within shells of dimensions within dimensions within dimensions within dimensions. So it just depends on what frequency you entered the portal in as to where you wind up.
And also what's relevant to your life theme in terms of what information you receive
Yes.
about that environment?
Yes, so there isn't one place I can tell you about.
In fact, aren't most of these things sort of geared towards what will excite us on a deep level based on our own unique?
Well, generally speaking, or they're certainly geared toward the idea of the kind of information that you agreed to participate in the theme of exploration on Earth.
And that's why people have so many different kinds of experiences, because it's all uniquely tailored
Yes,
for their consciousness.
of course it is. How could it be otherwise?
Right? Yes, because you're doing it. This individual is very excited about Atlantis, and
Yes.
he wanted to know, or she, some hot spots to go to tap into Atlantean energy and give themselves the opportunity to receive information there.
Well, certainly the Bahamas, the areas you know as Cuba, the area you know as the Yucatan, and even across the sea, the area that you know as Crete. Some areas in Spain, some areas in the area you call North Africa and ancient Egypt do still have some Atlantean remnants to the ideas of survivors that went there. So any of those places can be energy centers that you can gravitate yourself to based on what you're attracted to do or experience, that can allow you, as a permission slip, more efficacy in tapping into Atlantean information.
And I know the Bimini Road, many people think that it's underwater.
Yes,
and
yes.
You can actually swim along and look at the Bimini Road.
Yes, well, it wasn't originally a road, it's a collapsed wall.
Oh. Yeah, because it just looks like these huge concrete blocks.
Yes.
That stretch on for a long period of time, and you can swim along it.
Yes. Well, if you look on a map that shows you what that area looked like when the water level was lower during the Ice Age, the ocean level was lower, you will see what the actual outline of that main Atlantean island was. And you can see more clearly when the water is lower, where other locations also allowed for cities to be built. But again, remember, even though many people depict the concept of ancient Atlantis as looking sort of Grecian, the true architecture of Atlantis is more the idea of Mayan or Aztec.
And it's quite rural in the sense of the society itself, yes?
Well, in a sense, yes. There were some main city parts, but for the most part, yes, the cities were quite open. There was quite a lot of rural countryside that surrounded them and was utilized for farming and different purposes.
Will a time come where we'll actually be able to, in a sense, see, because our vibration is higher? Like, can you see Atlantis
Yes.
from your vibrational level?
Absolutely. That's why we're telling you the architecture isn't what most people think.
That's so interesting. So we're capable of achieving that in our lifetime, yes?
Yes, of course.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, so this question has to do with interacting with different versions of a person. And does each version represent a different, distinct soul that you're looking at when you...
If you're talking about the idea of one single body, then no. Doesn't represent different souls. It represents different aspects of the same soul.
Okay. And then when people are a different version because they're in my reality that I prefer, does that different version depend on me, or is there something that they do? So does this mean that if I experience something that I view as negative, it's up to me to change my vibration, which will then give me a different version of that person?
That can happen, yes. But the idea is that you're taking some information from them in your telepathic contact, and you're rendering out of your own energy, out of your own consciousness, a reasonable facsimile, not only of what you're getting from them, but also what you're taking from your own belief systems and what you need to see. So yes, very often changing your frequency, coming from a different place, will allow you to, quote unquote, manufacture a different version of them because you've shifted to another reality where there already is a different version of them, because now you're coming from a different place, a different frequency, a different reality.
Yeah, occasionally you will actually hear of somebody having a negative interaction with someone and then going into a meditative state, communicating with that person on a higher level in a sense, and balancing their own energy in relation to what was communicated to them, and then going back and reconnecting with the physical person and finding that their behavior has also changed.
Correct, but the truth is their behavior hasn't changed because the person they're dealing with is actually a different person.
Okay, so they're getting another version of that person.
Because they're in a different parallel version of Earth. Yes.
It's very interesting because it really does shift the focus back to your own personal responsibility, but at the same time, you're not to blame for other people's negative behavior, or the fact that you see another person's negative behavior does not mean that's a one-on-one reflection of your own negativity.
Correct. The issues that other people may have that you attract into your life may have nothing to do with your issues, but there's a reason why they're there. It might be because you need to help them. It might be because you need to act as a sounding board in some way or a reflection to them for their issues, whether they know it or not. But generally speaking, though it can sometimes be a one-to-one reflection, it isn't always. You have to have the discernment to be able to tell what's actually going on and why that person has been attracted or at least allowed by you into your life.
Yes, and the idea is what you do with the transmission or the receipt of information from that person.
Absolutely.
It puts it back in your court that what you do with it will determine the
Yes.
effect that you get out of it.
Yes, because no matter how the situation originated, whether it was created from negativity, no matter what anyone else's experience or opinion is or perspective is of the situation, you still get to determine how the situation will affect you because you're the one affecting yourself with your relationship and definition of that particular situation. So you can always get a benefit no matter what happens, depending on what you choose to do in relation to that circumstance.
And when people die at the same time, like in a plane crash or something like that, do they
Yes.
have an awareness of the other people who are transitioning at the same time that they do?
Sometimes, not always. Again, it depends upon their vibrational path.
Yeah, it's just so interesting, like that a whole group of people would get on a plane and when it crashes, they're all transitioning simultaneously.
Yes. Well, it's not really, if you stop and think about it, any more mysterious than all the people getting on the plane because they happen to be going to the same city. It's just that they're going to a city they didn't necessarily realize they were going to.
Yeah, that's intense.
Well, again, it's no more mysterious than the kind of orchestration that happens when you get on any particular kind of a device. So again, the orchestration of getting a certain amount of people on a certain vehicle to go to a certain city is an orchestration. This is no different.
And it's also part, if the people may not be aware that they've chosen that, but at some level, they've taken the exit in a sense.
Yes.
For whatever their specific purpose was or reasoning
Yes.
was, or it was their time.
Whether they know it or not, they have bought a ticket to that particular destination in a coordinated orchestration with the others. Those that haven't, you will find, as you often hear, will find themselves not necessarily getting on that plane for one reason or another synchronistically.
Yeah, it certainly brings back memories of the 9/11 situation. And
Yes. And again, none of this excuses the perpetration of these particular kinds of events, but people will take advantage of whatever they need to take advantage of for a variety of reasons. And remember that sometimes those reasons are a higher level of themselves may be willing to go out that way to help the people that remain behind realize how to make sure things like that aren't necessarily opportunities for people in the future ever again. Because there are many ways that you can leave physical reality. It does not have to be through the idea of disaster or terrorism or anything like that. You will find a way when it's your time to find a way. But the idea can be that certainly those kinds of ways don't need to be the ways if you feel that that is too disruptive to the psyche that allows you to find a peaceful situation in your reality.
So, is there anything we can do to consciously choose the way we die instead of it just randomly happening when the time is right?
Well, yes, of course there is. There are several ways. But the idea, of course, is you don't necessarily have to pay attention to that, or you don't really have to necessarily know about that. If there is purpose, then yes, you can know. A well-known story on your planet comes from an individual known as Cochise, who knew the exact time of his death and predicted it. But again, it's not always important that you know that. If there is purpose to it, you will know. But again, the only way it's most likely you will know if you need to know is by, guess what? Following the formula.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Because anything, any kind of information that is truly relevant for you to know about on your journey, on your path, will come to you when you follow the formula, because the formula leaves nothing relevant out.
For example, like with Steve Irwin, he was definitely following his passion when he was swimming with that stingray.
Yes.
And yet that turned out to be the way that he was going to exit the planet.
And many people will choose to do that while they're doing something they love to do. In a sense, they're, quote unquote, dying happy.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a good way to approach it then. Do what excites you the most with integrity and following all the other elements of the formula. And if it is your time, that will, at least you will go out doing something you love doing.
Absolutely. If you want to put it in those pragmatic terms, that can work. Again, please do remember that when you do transition, you will understand exactly why you may have chosen that path, and it'll be perfectly fine.
And so, energetically and mechanically speaking, what does it mean to be grounded or ungrounded?
Well, again, in true alignment with yourself is grounding. Misalignment, being out of alignment with yourself, is ungrounding, for lack of a better term, to put it in the most simplistic way.
So, in a sense, when you follow a shamanic path, do you need to keep a foot in both worlds, so to speak?
As long as you find that it is not your time to transition, then automatically, yes, because any shaman or anyone in balance acts like a link or a bridge between the physical and non-physical realities. So yes, you're automatically a bridge. Therefore, 1 foot in each realm is exactly what needs to happen.
And that's a skill unto itself.
Yes, it is. It's an art like any.
Now, this was the highest asked question, and that was, what is driving or causing the splitting of parallel realities, and why is it happening now?
What is driving it is the freedom to choose and the recognition that your reality and that you are bigger than you thought. You're coming to the realization that you, quote unquote, occupy more space than just your physical bodies. And therefore your urging or yearning to be more of yourself is making you more aware of the things that you are connected to, the other realities that you're actually participating in creating with your consciousness. Therefore, this splitting is a natural result. The driving of this awareness is a natural result of the expansion of consciousness into more levels, or I'll put it this way, the expansion of your awareness of your consciousness already existing in more levels. And that's what's driving it at this time, because as we have said before, you're now at the end of the cycle of forgetting and now beginning the cycle of remembering more of who you are. This is just the timing, the natural timing you have created for the overall collective theme going through the different cycles of change on the earth. This is what Earth is all about. And therefore, that's why this is the timing of it. Just in the same way that the timing of a graduation from any particular level of class or school has its own timing, because you've learned what you need to learn. So you move on to the next level. So you're at the end of the cycle now. You've gone through all the different kinds of machinations of negative and positive ideas that are relevant for the Earth cycle. Now you're expanding your awareness into other dimensions, becoming aware of the fact that you exist in other dimensions, and therefore that naturally drives this particular splitting experience.
It almost sounds like it's sort of the birth of Homo galacticus.
The beginning of it, yes. That's where you're moving to. You're going to the next class. You're going to college. You're going to university now. You are going out into the world and also starting to apply these ideas. In a sense, you are actually now moving into the job market of the galaxy.
This is a current event question that I think I'll ask.
We may or may not be able to address it. We will see.
Right. So the question is that there are some people who really want to have the vaccine, and they feel like their consciousness has been swayed, or they're fearful that they're harboring beliefs that'll make it harmful to them because there's a lot of controversy around it. Is there a permission slip that an individual who wants to have the vaccine can use to eliminate any subconscious issues around doing it?
Well, this is a process, as we have said, because it involves the process of getting in touch with your belief systems, finding the ones that might be negative or fear-based and letting them go so that you give yourself clearer discernment through synchronicity that comes to you as to what kind of choice is actually more in alignment with who you truly are. And that's all we can say at this time about that.
Okay. And this also comes back to the idea of our history as humans, and obviously we're starting to see the future aspects. When we look to the past, technically, of why primates and human DNA is so similar, is there anything you can share with us about that? Why it is that way?
Well, that's not really a mystery. As we have said, the Anunnaki chose an evolved hominid on your planet from the idea of the evolution of the primates up to a certain period, such as Homo erectus, to then inject their own genetic material into to create Homo sapien. So why should it be a mystery if you know that the original material used to create Homo sapien with the addition of the Anunnaki extraterrestrial genetics came from a pool of primates? Why should your genetic material be that different?
Well, I think it's also, were they surprised when the beings they created had such a high propensity for violence?
Some of them, a little bit, yes. They didn't necessarily expect that.
Did they think that the alien DNA would mitigate that?
Some of them thought it might, but remember that the reason why that group of Anunnaki were recalled was because they had acted out of hubris.
Well, there you go. That's part of what happens with humans too. We act out of hubris.
Exactly. Therefore, it wasn't necessarily too surprising, since they obviously had the potential for that even in their own DNA.
I see. Okay. And one question that came up was, why we experience pain in childbirth, since it's a natural process. And it seems like other species don't experience the degree that we do. So
yes, but it's not a natural process anymore ever since you were hybridized, because you were given certain features that were not there originally. In a sense, it's like you're giving birth to an alien that has a bigger head than you otherwise would have had as Homo erectus. Certain things in your genetic makeup changed, but certain things didn't change that much. And one of the things that didn't change that much was the idea of the birth canal. But since the idea of the increase, the enlargement of the cranium was one of the genetic alterations, then yes, actually human childbirth is not natural.
well, that explains that, because certainly had a lot of humans dying in childbirth
Yes.
many centuries.
Yes.
Um, this is a question about paradox. Can
Yes.
you name the main, most basic of all large paradoxes, things that cannot exist together by the rules of physical reality, but obviously do, that we as humans need to always be in conscious recognition with in order to experience life holistically?
We would answer that the largest paradox is your ability to even perceive that paradoxes exist. Because the idea of your focus in physical reality can be so limiting that you don't necessarily often perceive the concept that something contradictory can also simultaneously exist with what you expect to exist, and yet it does. So you have developed the ability to perceive that two seemingly contradictory things can coexist side by side, which helps drive you back toward the center and the balance point. So, in a sense, the biggest paradox is that you can perceive paradox at all.
Wow. And I guess on a day-to-day basis, it can be helpful to tune into the idea that there's other levels of you where what appears to be this or that is this and that.
Correct.
Um, if you reach a plateau, what's the simplest way to raise your vibration?
Well, first of all, to know that you haven't reached the ultimate plateau, knowing there is a higher plateau is the first step. But again, you have to allow for pause to happen in the natural order of things. Sometimes synchronicity will say, no, don't go any further right now. Stay here, ruminate, learn from what you have already experienced in climbing to this level. Stay here for a while and rest, absorb. Then, when it is time for you to continue to climb and raise your frequency, continue to follow the formula, and a new plateau will be provided through synchronicity. When it's time for synchronicity to say, it's time to move on, it will show you. But if synchronicity says no, no moving right now, then accept the plateau as a place to learn something, not as an interruption.
Okay. And something that we've talked about before having to do with trauma, and individuals who have experienced trauma in childhood and that are continuing to recreate the experience in the present moment.
Because they still identify themselves as actually being that child, which they're not, because they are a different person. Now, it doesn't mean you can't continue to use the sense of continuity, the ability to create continuity to make it seem as if you're just the adult of that particular child. But you can now play with continuity in a way that will allow you to make whatever connections to that experience you feel you still need to, if you believe you need to learn something from it that you can apply in your present reality. But at the same time, knowing that that child isn't you, because as you become a new person, you create not only what appears to be a new present and a new future, but also a new past, and therefore a new childhood that leads to whatever the new person is that you are now today. So maintain whatever portions of that experience or recreate them for yourself if you wish to, if you believe that there is still something you can get from it. But at the same time, paradoxically, concurrently, allow yourself to also realize that whatever it was that that child experienced is not something that you experienced. That's a different person.
And you can change your relationship to the other person that had that experience. You don't have to abandon them in a sense.
No, not at all.
Or
You can, as we have suggested, start informing yourself here from your future self instead of your past self, and at the same time realize that you are the future self of that child if you wish to be. Therefore, send waves of energy, compassion, and love to that child, and that creates this kind of a bootstrapping loop where you bring yourself up to the present being that you choose to be now by having sent from the present being you are now energy back to that child to give them the opportunity to go through a process of becoming the being that you are now.
I think that's very helpful.
All right.
And then lastly, just a question about finding your most powerful permission slips. I'm guessing that the idea of finding your most powerful permission slip is something that you explore.
It is, because remember, the reason you're attracted to use something is because it will work for you, or you wouldn't be attracted to it. So if there is curiosity to explore, if there's an attraction to a particular technique, tool, ritual, or process, those are the clues that it will probably work with your present belief system. When your belief system changes, you may find yourself attracted to different permission slips. Again, always remembering you are the ultimate permission slip because you're the one making the change anyway. The permission slip isn't actually doing it for you, but your belief system says that it will help you do it for yourself more easily. So by all means, whatever you're attracted to is what will work. And that's up to the synchronicity in your life and you simply following the vibrational path of passion.
It's wonderful. It's all designed to be wonderful for us.
It works automatically. It works easily and effortlessly as long as you don't contradict it with belief systems and definitions that are out of alignment with who you prefer to be. So,
thank you so much, Bashar. We really appreciate your sharing and your exciting life that you are opening up for all of us.
Again, it is our passion and our pleasure to share these ideas with you, and we thank you with unconditional love and support. And now, allow yourselves to become prepared for the journey that takes place on your meditation.